true north strong and free? Maybe, maybe not. How about Alberta strong and free? Maybe, maybe not. Not Canada as the 51st state. Maybe it's Alberta as the 51st state. Who knows? So Albertans are considering a referendum on separating from Canada. And yet again, President Trump just can't keep out of it. Sir, you did enough damage to Canada during the elections. Mr. President, please be quiet about Canada and Alberta. They don't need your help or your opinions. I like you, but really, be quiet, sit it out, please. What would the process of leaving Canada entail? First of all, enough signatures need to be collected from those who voted in the most recent provincial election just to get a question on a ballot. How many? Well, at the moment, that's 20%. However, Danielle Smith's government is proposing changes to the laws which would see that number drop to 10%. And the time period to collect signatures is currently 90 days. That's an awful tight period. But that number will likely be going up to 120, giving more breathing room to collect. In Alberta's last general election, held May 29, 2023, 1,763,441 valid votes were cast. Normally, in previous years, Alberta hasn't exactly been known as having a stellar turnout during an election, but this time around they sure did. Under the current rules, and using that total, that would mean a total of roughly 353,000 signatures would be needed. But under the new rules, roughly, again, 177,000 signatures would be needed. The bar has been lowered, making it more possible for a separation referendum to be held. This does not guarantee separation, only that the signatories want a referendum to be called, and that the threshold to hold a referendum has been met. Now, these new referenda rules don't just cover separation. They could get any number of different issues on the ballot within reason. Separation from Canada is just one example. Now let's move forward a bit and consider that the referendum succeeds and that the good people of Alberta decide to leave Canada. Let us see, in my opinion anyway, and with a bit of fantasizing, what happens next. And again, I emphasize, this is just my opinion and a bit of fantasizing. So, first things first. What happens first? Well, the lawyers get involved. Probably lots and lots and lots of highly expensive lawyers. Along with them will come an army of bureaucrats. We all love bureaucrats, don't we? Yeah, that was sarcasm. An army of bureaucrats bogging the process down with procedures. And they will want to make sure that all of their input gets considered first. If the Alberta legislature runs with it, negotiations will have to begin with Canada. What happens? What do we take with us? What do we have to supply, and what do we have to leave behind? Well, let's take a look at what the position of Canada would most likely be. All military bases would have to be demanned and offered for sale to Alberta. Yes, that's right, for sale. Canada owns them. not Alberta. The vaunted Royal Canadian Mounted Police would have to be removed from the province, which means that Alberta would have to have its own provincial police force. What about rail lines which cross Alberta? Canadian Pacific and Canadian National both have holdings in Alberta and ship a lot of freight and a few passengers east to west, and there's a little bit of north-south as well. Negotiations would have to be included over ownership and transit rights. Air traffic control. Alberta would be fully responsible for the airspace over Alberta. Border crossing control. Alberta would now be responsible for its own customs and border services agencies. Management of waterways. They would now cross international boundaries rather than just provincial ones. Alberta would be responsible for fisheries, hunting, etc. First Nations issues. Alberta becomes responsible for Alberta-centric native bands. Road transit, the national highway system. Alberta would have to take that over fully. And Canada would have to negotiate passage from eastern Alberta border to the eastern BC border to the northern Alberta border. With the input of the lawyers and the bureaucrats on both sides, the process of negotiations could take many years. This will not be a quick process by any stretch of the imagination. And remember this, to a bureaucrat, process is everything and outcome is nothing. This is assuming Ottawa accepts the outcome. Remember, there are two parties here, and Alberta has neither a standing equipped army nor a provincial police force, and Canada could simply refuse to negotiate. Let's talk about just two of the issues driving this desire on the part of Albertans to leave Confederation. Resources. Alberta has the fourth largest reserves of oil in the world. In fact, America gets a huge amount of oil from Alberta at lower than the going rate for crude oil. BC, Ottawa, and Quebec are keeping those reserves of oil and natural gas landlocked deliberately because they are morons and because of a highly false crisis sometimes referred to as climate change. But I digress. Leaving Canada will not change this. Alberta will still be landlocked, leaving the only big customer as still the United States, who will continue paying below market value for crude oil. Brent sweet crude is the benchmark. America pays below that for Alberta crude. British Columbia is governed by communist ideologues in the NDP, the New Democratic Party, or as I like to call them, the National Disgrace Party. As long as they reign, yep, I said reign, between them and Ottawa, there will be no more pipelines going from Alberta to the coast, no matter what, and the tanker ban will remain. And Ottawa and Quebec are still going to say no to an eastward-bound pipeline. Ottawa has a lot of good MPs from the Progressive Conservatives, but there aren't enough of them to be of much use. And Quebec, what can we say about them? It is governed by leftist separatist ideologues of the French kind. So still no joy. Alberta could, of course, turn off the taps that feed natural gas to British Columbia, but would that work? Or would it just be used against the government of Alberta? So again, in all this, Alberta will remain trapped and unable to make use of its vast oil and natural gas reserves, still at the mercy of governments from all sides. Issue number 2. A topic which will be mostly foreign to most Americans. Transfer payments. Transfer payments are a kind of tax, a mandatory sharing of revenues from natural resource sales from the rich provinces to the, quote, poorer provinces, end quote. Those transfer payments would come to an end. No more profit sharing with provincial governments, which are almost exclusively in the East, who are sucking off the government teat at the expense of Alberta, who has put out billions of dollars to those who never, ever give back in Alberta's tough times. Let's talk about that subject a little further. Those transfer payments are why I believe Ottawa would never let Alberta separate from Canada. Oh, they wouldn't knuckle under and give in to Alberta demands for east-west pipelines. No, that will never happen. Neither would the cancelling of the tanker bans on the west coast, nor would they knuckle under for better interprovincial trade either, especially under a Liberal government. And especially if the leader is a dyed-in-the-wool World Economic Forum adherent, perhaps one who even sat on the World Economic Forum board. There's no secret there. It's not just a conspiracy theory. The current leader has done that. And he is also a big advocate of Cloward Piven. There's no time to cover that subject here. They like having all of that beautiful Alberta cash in spite of complaining about all the dirty oil and gas that raises it. Here's what I think will happen. And bear in mind, this is just my opinion combined with a bit of fantasizing from the depths of a 100% overactive imagination. It's neither prophecy nor conspiracy theory, just pure speculation. 1. Alberta holds its referendum. 2. Albertans decide to split with Canada. 3. Providing Ottawa decides to go along with this, negotiations begin. 4. Whoever is Prime Minister, most probably a Liberal, quietly enables the Emergencies Act. 5. As part of that, the PM declares the government of Alberta to be an imminent threat to Canada. 6. The RCMP are sent in force to arrest said Alberta government, possibly aided by a portion of what little military Canada still has left. 7. The people of Alberta begin protesting. Agitators, possibly deliberately sent, infiltrate and get limited rioting going, then slip off. 8. The PM declares martial law. 9. The army, again, such as it is sent in, eager for action. And even though the Canadian military only has munitions for 3 days, that limit only applies when dealing with a military power. Against Canada's civilians, it would last a lot longer. 10. Mass arrests occur. 11. Alberta is forced to comply and a caretaker government is put in place. The end of the separation movement occurs, at least for now. So America offers some refuge for displaced Albertans accused of sedition. If a Republican government is still in place, that is. If a Democrat government has taken over in D.C., you can forget that. Well, this is just one set of scenarios, speculation for the good people up in Alberta, Canada. One thing to consider is this. There will be massive disgust among members of Parliament. The enacting of the Emergencies Act will be ended, and the Liberal government would likely fall, as even Liberal MPs would flee out of fear of being chucked from their seats in an election. They would even refuse to vote. There would be a good possibility that the Governor General of Canada, whoever that would be at the time, would use his or her powers to forcibly bring the government down. Yes, the Governor General can do that. And there are rules the government must follow regarding the enacting of the Emergencies Act. That includes parliamentary review, and it must be done within a specific period of time. However, the damage will have been done. Now, let's look at one more scenario that could possibly happen. Just suppose that none of the above speculation about the Emergencies Act happens. Let's just suppose that Ottawa agrees to let Alberta go its own way. What happens next? Well, now, Edmonton becomes the capital of the free and autonomous state of Alberta. Now, let's also suppose that the government decides it wants to become a part of the United States of America, to become the 51st state. Or let's suppose that America decides that it wants Alberta to become the 51st state. So either government representatives from Edmonton approach politicians in Washington, D.C., or the politicians and bureaucrats in D.C. contact the politicians and bureaucrats in Edmonton. And the process of making Alberta the 51st state begins. It will be a long process. It will take additional years on top of the split from Canada in order to become a part of the United States. And it very probably wouldn't work the way you think it would. And once again, the bureaucrats and lawyers on both sides would get deeply involved, stretching the process out. Use your imagination at this point. It won't be a cakewalk. Think deeply, really deeply, before deciding to separate from Canada. There could be consequences.